Hi, friends. Welcome to the After Party, a TSF Network podcast. This is just a mixtape of purposeful, encouraging, and fun content from across all the shows who are part of our podcast network. I'm Annie F. Downs, one of the co-founders of the network.
And I'm Fallon Klug, the TSF Network's Director of Operations. I'm so glad I'm here with Annie. We are happy to bring you today's episode, so thanks for tuning in. Okay. I am really excited about today's episode.
Yeah.
It's from the Live in Love podcast with our girl, Lauren Akins. Okay, y'all, today's episode, it's episode 23, Live in Love While Having Hard Conversations with Kids with Sissy Goff and Patoya Hall. We promise that the content we share here from our network is fun, but it's also super purposeful and impactful, and today's episode is just that.
Yes, man, this one was, I get to be a part of this episode as well, and this one was so powerful to me. Even as a person who doesn't have kids yet, it was so powerful. Lauren sits down with Sissy Goff from the Raising Boys and Girls podcast, a fellow podcaster on our network, along with Lauren's dear friend, Patoya Hall, to talk about what it looks like to live in love while having really hard conversations with your kids. Man, we are so grateful for this show, and we know a lot of y'all are too, so we hope you enjoy this episode.
Hey, y'all. This is Lauren Akins, and welcome to Season 3 of the Live in Love podcast. I am so excited to be back with y'all, and this season is just all about parenting conversations. That is just what rules my world right now as a mom of 4 girls. So we are taking the time to sit down with fellow parents, parenting experts, and my village of family and friends that help me raise my girls to talk about what it looks like to live in love while parenting.
And I'm Annie F. Downs. I'm so grateful to be here. I've just loved Season 3, Lauren. I've loved it so much, just hearing and learning alongside. And if you guys have loved this as much as I have, please rate and review the show. It just helps so much and helps us to give more hope to parents out there because the show will get in front of them. And if you haven't gotten a chance to grab a copy of Lauren's book, Live in Love, you totally should. It is such a great read. Just pick it up wherever you love to buy books. And today on the show, Lauren, I mean, having hard conversations with kids is just a constant thing. And especially what our community has been through here lately in Nashville and what's going on globally. Like, having hard conversations is just part of the deal.
Yeah, and it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard, which is why I think today it's going to be so powerful and can probably feel hard for some people, but I think will be such a good listen. We're going to get to sit down with some of you have heard before from Sissy Goff on our season, but we're also going to sit down with my friend Patoya, and we're going to talk about what it looks like to live in love while having hard conversations with your kids.
And a quick note, because of a power outage in the studio, we had one microphone that is a little faulty, but you will hear Sissy's voice change partway through the show. Just wanted you to know that is why that is. Lauren, let's do it again.
Okay.
I mean, this is one that we know parents have been asking for and wanting more information and wanting just a conversation on how do we have the hard conversations with our kids.
Yeah.
For starters, for you, is that something that's already happening? I mean, are you already doing hard conversations with your kids?
Yes. So my kids now are 7, 5, 3, and 1. So the 3 and 1, not so much. The 5 and 7 are really, the harder questions are definitely ramping up in our house.
Yeah.
And which is why I think I have been most excited about this podcast, if I'm being quite honest, out of all 8 that we're doing, because I feel like this is really where I'm at in the season of life that I'm in all kinds of circumstances. And I'm just really excited to be able to talk about that with y'all today.
Introduce Patoya to us, and y'all how do y'all know each other?
So Patoya and I met, what year was it? 15? No, 12. Oh my gosh, I got married in 12.
2010.
Where am I? What year is it?
What year?
10?
10 or 2009?
Something
like that.
I was in college. And we worked at Pine Cove together.
Oh my gosh, counselors.
In Tyler, Texas.
Patoya, for sure you are.
us.
For sure you are.
Children.
Yeah, that's right. And we became just very fast friends.
Yeah.
I mean, she was one of my first friends at Pine Cove as a counselor, and we just kind of stuck together all summer.
Yeah.
And Patoya lives in Texas, so we don't live down the street from each other,
Yeah.
but in our hearts and spirits, we are still down the road from each other, and so we stay really close. Her and I have similar stories as moms. Both of us came to be moms through adoption.
Yeah.
And also similar stories. I am parenting at least one of mine who does not look like me, and she is parenting kids who do not look like her. So I think it's been really cool to have that friendship as we're doing it at the same time.
Yeah.
Of like, hey, did you get weird looks at the grocery store today? Yep, sure did. How about you?
Do people think you're the babysitter? Or?
Right. And so it's, it's when you're not alone in that, I think it bonds you in ways that you don't feel with some of your other friends. And so it's been a really sweet friendship that has definitely blossomed even more over the last however many years that we've started to have kids. So.
Yeah, Patoya, will you, since a lot of our friends are listening, will you tell us about your kids? Tell us about you and are married, single, how many kids and what you do?
So I am single and I work full-time I live in Waco, Texas. I work at Baylor University. And so my kids are 2.5 and 2 months.
Wow.
And because everyone's listening, I am Black and my kids are white.
Yeah.
And one of them, actually, Lauren and I talked about this at one point. She was like, actually, if you had a white husband, Addie could be yours.
Oh,
like,
wow.
That's true. So people still kind of look at us interestingly, but not as much as now that my baby is blonde-haired, blue-eyed little boy.
Oh, wow.
So now it's a little more interesting of conversations coming up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we kind of we became a family because of 2020 COVID situations. And so, very long story short, the Lord wanted Addie to be with me.
Yeah.
It happened so fast, and it was very clear that she was meant to be at my house. And it was like, okay. And our little Bubba is what we call him.
Yeah.
She calls him Bubba. He was so unexpected. So
2 months. You are fresh.
Yeah. She's sleepy.
Yeah, very sleepy. So also not in this world right now. My brain is not fully functioning, but
and they're biological.
They're biological siblings, and so we're figuring it out.
So do you have an open relationship with the birth mom?
We don't.
Okay.
So she actually doesn't have a clue who I am.
Got
with all of our court visits and all the things, we keep me very hidden. And anything that's online, my name just says foster parent or adoptive parent, because Waco is a small community. Yeah. And she's not at her healthiest. Yeah. And so it's best right now to keep it separate. Yeah. So
wow.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation.
Mm-hmm.
Tricky sometimes.
Yeah.
Especially with him looking a little more like her, and she got to see him a lot more than she saw Addie. So it's an interesting setup. Wow. Yeah.
Good thing we have Sissy Goff with us as well. All right, Sissy. Well, we had you on episode 2 with David Thomas talking about raising boys and girls, but tell us again who you are just in case someone didn't get to hear that episode. Okay.
Well, I should start by saying I was a counselor at a camp in Texas. Too.
Oh my gosh, where are you?
I don't think you should say down a river, but it was
all the camp counselors today.
Oh, really?
Oh my goodness.
So fun.
I love it.
Was still a camp counselor. So I am a therapist at a place called Daystar Counseling Ministries in Nashville here, and have been counseling kids for 30 years this year, which was
oh my goodness,
amazing. What a gift.
It makes me feel so old. And what else was I supposed to say? I have a podcast, Boys and Girls. Yeah, just out of counseling, I've gotten to do some fun things like that.
Yeah.
So happy you're here.
TSF family.
That's right. Oh man, we're so glad you're here. So, really, Sissy, one of our hopes is that you're doing this all the time. You're having hard conversations with kids all day, every day for 30 years. Particularly for us in Nashville, you have really been a part of helping the Covenant School heal and process the shooting that happened in the spring. So I don't know, Lauren, do y'all have do you want to start by what do you want Sissy to help you with?
The questions at my house just over the last couple of seasons have consistently been, at least from my older 2, questions about Willa Gray and she was not grown in my tummy, but Ada James was, and her skin is different than mine. Her hair is different than mine. Why don't we know her real mommy and daddy? You know, that was something that one of my kids said. And I said, well, I am your real mommy, and daddy is your real daddy. But and my response to her was, the Lord just chose you to be in another woman's tummy, and he waited until the perfect time for me to meet you, and you get to have that story. Only you get to have that story, and the Lord is using your story to show people really about his heart and how he loves us well. And I said that way more collected today. I was sobbing the first time we said, because it was a moment where her whole life she's been so proud of her story. Proud to be from Uganda, proud to have black skin, proud to have an afro. Like, she loves it. And when she would introduce, because she's our oldest, she would introduce herself and say, I'm Willa Gray, I'm from Uganda, and this is Ada James, and she's not. And it's like just the innocence of a child is so precious. But as she's gotten older, I think Patoya and I were talking last night, and just adoption stories always begin with grief, because one family has to die for another family to be born.
Wow.
And so I think in that, my oldest, Willa Gray, is starting to feel that grief, and I don't think she really knows how to talk about it or what to do with it. And so the first time that she started asking me those questions, she kind of like in a really quiet voice, kind of like timid, like not sure how to say what she was feeling in her heart. And I could feel it. I mean, my spirit was just like, my heart was just breaking for her, because I could see the grief. And I, after we talked a while, I said, does that make you sad? And she kind of sat there for a second in tears. Oh, y'all, it broke me. But she said, yeah, it makes me sad. And I said, baby, it's okay. It makes me sad too. And so we were able to like sit in that sadness together, and just me to say, we don't know a lot of your story before I got to know you. And we tried so hard, but I'm choosing to believe that the woman who had you, or whoever was in charge of you, knew that they couldn't give you what you needed. And so they put you in a place the best they knew how to take care of you, because they loved you. And we don't know that story on this side of heaven, but when we get to heaven, me and you will go straight up to Jesus, and we will be like, hey, can we see? Can we just see? And can we meet the mommy that carried you in her tummy? Can we meet the daddy? Can we meet your siblings if you have siblings somewhere? Like, God will show us all the things, but he just might not show us on this side of heaven. And that's hard, but that's okay, because it's hard for me too. And so sitting in that with her has been really hard, because up until now, it's just been like butterflies and rainbows, you know, and such a celebratory thing. And as a mom, starting with that question at 6 and 7 years old, imagining as she gets older and the questions get bigger and deeper, it just hurts my heart to think about. And I'm like, am I prepared? Are you sure, Lord, that I can do this? And so that's where we're at in our season of life.
Well, what you've done already is beautiful. I mean, you set the stage for the conversation.
I know already.
For it to be like the both ends, that she can feel joy and sorrow together, and then you're going to be with her. And I think any hard conversation, there's not a right answer. I mean, we all know that. Yeah. But what you did with her was beautiful. I don't know what you could have done that would have set her up to be in all of those places at once more beautifully. So what a gift that you are her mom. And God chose you. One of my favorite stories ever about a girl who was adopted. I was counseling this girl several years ago, and she was in high school, and they didn't know a lot about her birth parents, and she was struggling with depression. And
in high school.
And I'd seen her for years, and we were talking about it and working together, and she was better some, but I felt like it was the point she probably needed medication. And so I brought her mom in and sat down. I mean, she sat down, and I just said, your daughter's struggling, and we're making some progress, but I just feel like she maybe needs more, and it's time to have that conversation. And her mom, I mean, y'all, her mom is amazing, and she held her hand and she said, "Oh, honey, I just hate that you're in this place." And she said, "And I get it. You know, I've struggled similarly, and we have a real family history for depression." And this girl looked at her mom and she said, "Mom, I was adopted." Mom said, "I always forget."
That's so sweet. It's so sweet.
Picture
Yeah.
the love that you two have for your kids.
Yeah.
Because you will always remember and you will forget.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So true.
for
Yeah.
sure.
That's so good.
I mean, can we just say you're never going to have the answers in who you are as who you're meant to be in every one of those conversations.
Yeah.
And then we're done with the podcast.
I mean,
It's so good.
Sissy, will you talk a little bit about, I mean, Lauren has that conversation with Willow Gray, with Ada James, and with the other girls. It's not a one and done.
No.
It won't be one and done for Patoya. I mean, this is, having hard conversations is just part of the gig from now on.
From now on. And any hard conversation, and I think particularly around grief, as kids develop and grow, you know, it's like we're turning around the same, I don't know, object and seeing it from a different perspective with each turn.
Yeah.
And so the questions, as you're already experiencing, are going to be different in each season of life. But what they need the most is for you just to sit with them and let them ask and know that you can be with them in it and hold space for it and be connected in the midst of it.
What, Patoya, talk about, I mean, if your oldest is 2.5,
Yeah.
I mean, but already, if people are saying in the grocery store they think you're the babysitter,
Yes.
that has to be the genesis for conversations that some people aren't having with their 2.5-year-olds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because when we are in the grocery store and we'll be in Target and we'll pass the makeup aisle and she'll see a black model and she'll say, "Mama, Mama," and she'll just be pointing at all these black women and she's like, "Mama," and of course that draws everyone's attention. So I'm like, amazing. But yeah, for her, it right now at least, I feel like, I mean, and you told me it was started with Willow Gray at 2, and I was like, that early, I'm not ready, but she starts to notice. So when my hair is a fro, she loves to play in my hair and dig in my hair. And, you know, she now notices women that look like me. And I think I try to lay a foundation right now with books that have families that are different, that all look different, and give her language of, "You grew in another mommy's tummy." She doesn't understand, but at least she'll be familiar, I'm hoping.
Yeah.
I think where I'm really intimidated and nervous is that we do know a lot of her story, and it's heartbreaking. And I'm probably going to choke up, so I will try to hold it together. But I got a picture of Biomom for the first time this year when her little brother came. And I'd never seen her, and it just makes it so much more real when you see someone's face. And so I think I'm intimidated about the brokenness and wanting to not glaze over that it's broken and just go to, but God brought you here, you know, and ignore where she came from and ignore the beginning of her story. So I think I want to be respectful and truthful with both of them. And she doesn't, for her, there's no sibling to compare to, you know, in the beginning. It was just me and her, you know, and now, and for her, it will be, why does her little brother even look different than her? Because they do have different hair and different skin tones, even though they have the same bio mom. So I just am like, Lord, I have no idea how I'm going to address some of these questions. I think I'm anxiously anticipating them, but doing the best I can to expose her to other diverse families and other even books and shows that talk about my hair. I think it's even important for her to see there are people that look like my mom and not just me and my brother. So I don't know if that's how you start with the 2.5-year-old, but that's in my head.
Yes. I think that's brilliant. To expose her right now. And, you know, again, I feel like I'm speaking a lot of generalities, but I think for both of you, I mean, as moms, God gives you intuition about your kids that he's not going to give anybody else. And so in those moments, he will give you what you need to say and the things to introduce into their lives. And I mean, y'all just trust your gut in any situation.
That's good.
I mean, even when I'm thinking about reading books to kids, I'm like, well, we
Yes.
read to them about school before they know what
So
school
true.
is.
Yeah.
And we read to them about a zoo before we take them to a zoo.
Oh,
I mean, what a
that's so
great
true.
way to, but then when they go to school, they go, wait, I read about this. I know this.
Yes.
My little nephew yesterday said he was going to dream about bologna sandwiches because Goofy eats them. He doesn't know
Oh
what
my
bologna
goodness.
is. He just, and so it sounds like, that Patoya is doing the things to prepare. But Sissy, for both of them, as they're parenting, that adoption's a hard conversation. Multi-race in one family is a hard conversation, but there are also earthquakes and school shootings and grandparents who pass away. How do we know how much we tell? Like when Patoya is thinking through, she knows 100% of this story. Patoya does. How much does her daughter need to know at 2.5 and at 4 and at 7? And
Yes. Thank you, Annie.
Not much right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I would just have the basics. And I feel like both of you have said little, I always think it's so good to have little phrases that we say to kids that we can go back to over and over and over. The mom that carried you in her tummy, but I'm your mom. You know, that you just have things that I always think about as an adult. There are things that I would say, my mom always said, you know, and what are those things that you want your kids to say? My mom always said. And so thinking about around this, but yes, I would have a snippet that you start with. And so often in any situation, when we're talking to kids about something that feels hard, we start to get anxious and we start to go on and on and on.
Yeah.
And it's more about, I mean, I think even with the covenant shooting, I think one of the things, I feel like parents have been struggling in a very different way than kids have. And we don't understand. And so we're trying to step in and fill in the gaps for them of our own not understanding, where they're not in that space and they don't have the same questions. And so in any conversation with kids, we want to have, you know, 2 sentences of age appropriate factual information and then say, what questions do you have for me? Because kids have this amazing innate ability to ask the questions that they're ready for the information.
It's amazing.
And if they don't ask, they're not ready. I mean, I have seen kids whose parents get divorced that at 6 have asked why, and I've seen kids who don't ask till 18.
Wow.
Because intuitively they knew, I do not want that information.
Wow.
And so we just really
incredible.
follow their lead in terms of what we answer.
I love that.
Sissy, so even with Addie and Patoya, I mean, when she asks next year, where's my mommy who looks like me? How much does Patoya say, well, you're not going to like this, but she is, you know, or is it, she's not here and I'm with you? Or, you know, like, do we always answer their question?
You always want your kids to feel like you're going to tell them the truth. And to be the source. And so I think we come up with an answer that is honest, but is not too much information. And so I don't know where she is. You probably don't need to say where she is on a podcast right now.
I know. I'm like, I feel like maybe, and you know, let's workshop this for me because SOS. Right now, the only words I have for it, even when little kids, we were talking about this last night, when little kids in the park come up to us and they ask the wildest things. I think I've said to a little kid, the mommy that had her is sick right now and can't take care of her.
Oh, wow.
So, and that was my like one response. And so I think I'm like, if she asks more questions, I may not have, I may turn into that. Here's too much information.
And it will be okay. It will be okay.
Yes. And also, it's okay to say, honey, I don't know.
Yeah.
But she's sick. And we're just praying that she's getting better.
Yeah.
Wherever she is. I mean, you don't have to have, again, I think that is our own panic of, I have to have the right thing to say.
Totally.
And what she wants, what your kids want is your reassurance and your presence.
Yeah.
That's what matters the most to them more than your answer.
That's so good.
Sissy, how do we know when the hard conversation is outside of our knowledge or skill, or like when's counseling for our kids the next thing? If the hard conversation is either we are sick and can't do it, like the parents are divorcing, or like, so how do we know the line when it's time to take our kids to see a therapist?
Can I give like 10 lines?
Yeah, for sure.
I think one is if you have more emotion around whatever it is than they do.
Yeah.
And because kids so often will intuitively try and rise up and protect us. And so, you know, in a divorce situation, in a grief situation, even in the covenant shooting, I mean, there are a lot of kids who feel like, I can't say this to my mom or my dad because I'm going to make them more sad.
Yeah.
And so
Wow.
in those times, I think they need somebody that can come and say all the harder things.
Yeah.
And know that that person's going to be okay, no matter what they say. So, I mean, that would be one. I would say, certainly, if you're in a place where you feel sick and you don't feel like you can give them an objective perspective. There was another one. One thing that I do think is really worth mentioning is, you know, right now we're in this epidemic of anxiety with kids. And one of the first ways we see it with kids are looping questions. And so they go around and around and around. And sometimes it's about something as simple as the schedule for the day, and that we can start to recognize it because it's about that, or it's about, I'm going to throw up. But sometimes it's basically the scariest or the hardest thing they can imagine developmentally. And so it could be even around adoption, that all of a sudden they start looping. And I've written a couple books on anxiety, and one of the things I read that was fascinating was we should never answer more than 5 questions about the same topic. And so if it feels like all of a sudden there's 400 questions a day about it, that means it's not about adoption anymore. It's about anxiety. And at that point,
Wow.
That is...
I would do something different.
Okay, can we talk
Amazing.
after this? 'Cause
Yeah.
My number 3, I think, is so anxious. Little Lennon. I think she's a little, which her daddy can tend to be that way. He's very healthy now, but I think he said on his
he said
podcast
it,
that he's a little bit anxious by nature. And I think Lennon, she started to do things, and I'm like, maybe she just got a different personality. Maybe she's 3. Same questions over and over and over. And I'm like, Lennon, honey, Mommy just answered that. And
But are they like, what are we having for dinner? Or
no, it's like, are you going to be here? It's always about me separating from her, or where is Daddy going, or where is Mackie going, our nanny, or where is Bunny going, or Gigi, my mom and his mom. And it's just, it's mostly about people being away from her. And she was born in 2020.
Yep. And that's the scariest thing for her developmentally.
Yeah.
Is being away from you.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's true. At
Wow.
3, that's the
Yeah.
scariest thing. Oh, interesting.
But none of my
Amazing.
kids have ever done that. And I think she might tend to have a little bit of her daddy.
Yeah, are you seeing 2020 babies? I mean, now they're all turning 3. So, I mean, is that a thing? Is separation different after 2020? Maybe for babies, but maybe also for 5-year-olds who did.
Dogs.
Yeah. And me.
Right.
Yes. You know, I mean, 3 is younger than I counsel, but I do parent consults for parents. It's so hard because we are now at 1 in 4 kids with girls twice as likely. And if a parent
Wow.
has it, kids are
Whoa,
7 times more likely.
Wow.
And so I don't even know that we can say yet the numbers on, but it's so rampant anyway.
Right.
I mean, I think I think every family probably
Yeah.
is going to have one anxious child in
Yeah.
2023.
Yeah.
Whenever they were born.
Okay, so Sissy, if as parents we do feel like we have a child that is showing maybe signs of being anxious, or especially like with us, I know it runs biologically in our family. What are things, well, 1, what are things that you look for? And 2, what are ways that you can try to be with them in that anxiety, sit with them in that, but also educate them in that, or try to help them where you can in that?
You know, I mean, I think it's different, again, developmentally, but at 3, it's a little harder because I think a lot of the language you might use to help her work through it is probably different. Although you're right. I mean, the average age of onset used to be 8. Now we're seeing it show up at 7, but signs as young as 3 and 4 and 5.
Wow.
And so what you're seeing makes a ton of sense. And I would say for her age in particular right now, I mean, one of the things that's happening for any of us when we get anxious is our blood flow that normally goes to our prefrontal cortex that helps us think rationally and manage our emotions. The blood vessels in our brain constrict, and it shifts it back to the amygdala, which is the fight or flight part of our brain. And so the first thing we always need to do is help them calm down, because the more anxious they get, the more that amygdala gets tripped up and they can't work themselves out of it. And so with her, I would say, anytime she starts to loop and say, where are you going, Mommy? When are you going to be back? Questions like that. I would get down on her little level, practice that attunement we know is so important and say, honey, you're okay.
Yeah.
I'm only going to be gone for a few minutes. Whoever is going to be with you is taking care of you. Let's take 3 deep breaths together. And I would just take 3. We always do square breathing with kids. I call it square breathing. David calls it combat breathing with boys because it sounds cooler.
Yeah.
But, the slow square on their leg. And then with a 3-year-old, I would do that. And then I would distract them.
Yeah.
And get them focused on something different. But I will say, I was just at Disney with my 4-year-old nephew. And he just gets so excited and then can't control his body as, 4-year-olds do. And so my sister kept practicing one of the things I talk about the most with anxiety, which was fun to watch her do it. But we always start with breathing, and then we use grounding techniques, which is a cognitive behavioral therapy tool that every counselor in the country uses. But 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is my favorite. And you could totally do it with her, where you say, tell me 5 things you see. Tell me 4 things you hear. Tell me 3 things you feel from a tactile sense. We don't want to talk about emotions right now.
Yeah.
Tell me 2 things you smell and 1 thing you taste. Because anything sensory related is going to anchor them to the present. And for any of us, when we're anxious, we're either in the past or the future. We're not in the moment.
Wow.
So breathing and grounding would be helpful in that moment.
Where has she been my whole life?
I'm like,
down the street, technically.
I thought
Your actual whole life. Yeah.
Apparently
I wish I could
neighbors.
just pull out a little notebook right now.
That's
Just
right.
see.
Listen, she has books.
Wow,
They
that's
got the
so
Raising
good.
Boys and Girls podcast.
The breathing
good.
thing we do with all,
Good.
well, not the 1-year-old, but 7, 5, and 3. Even Willa Gray this morning before we went to school, she was having to memorize a part for a play that they're doing, and she gets anxious to perform. She is not anxious, but in that I could sense her kind of, getting kind of frustrated and but it's too hard. And I'm like, baby, you got this. And so after a few times of us doing it, I could tell that she was just kind of tired of saying the line over and over. And I said, why don't you go out the front porch and sit outside for just a second and just breathe really good 3 times. And come back in. We'll start over.
Intuition. There you go.
Came back in, and she nailed it. Nailed it. So it's almost like that reset is so powerful, and it takes very little time.
Yes.
But it does change
the game.
Yeah.
For all of us.
Yeah. That's great.
That works even for my 2.5-year-old.
Yes.
I will tell her, Addie, take a breath. And hilarious, she spits on me because she goes,
Oh, yeah.
I'm like,
Of
okay,
course.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
that works.
it resets her,
Yes.
though.
Yes.
It really does help her. So I'm like, I don't know if she saw that at school at first, because I've said that to her, and she knows exactly what I'm trying to tell her to do. So, we're going to have to, when she can count, implement that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 thing. I love that.
Yeah, that's great.
Sissy, when national tragedies happen, and like a school shooting, or like a hurricane that comes through, or a tornado comes through near where you live. I'm thinking about your kids going back to school after the shooting at Covenant, your kids going back to their school.
Right.
How do we parent that? Those are hard conversations to say, the reason y'all are doing these lockdown drills.
Right.
And the reason that those friends don't have a house anymore is because of a fire. How do we parent those bigger global or national or citywide conversations?
It's hard to answer without, it feels so specific to the conversation, other than that same idea of have one leading statement of this is factually what's happened, and then let them ask questions. But again, it's not even the answers that matter the most in those moments. It's that you are with them and you're sitting with them, and that you're calm, that you're, everything the research says is that we need to be a calm, non-anxious presence with kids. And so that you can sit and hang in there with them and not let your own stuff rise up in the moment. But I think that we keep going. And then I always go back to that Mr. Rogers things about look for the helpers. Because I think anytime any of us, when we're anxious, when we're grieving, we can move outside of ourselves and have a sense of purpose. But even really young ones, it is really helpful for all of us. And we had I'm throwing out a lot of different things, but we had our staff last week, a week and a half ago, had training from a trauma expert who was really involved in Sandy Hook. And she said, which I have read repeatedly in the last few weeks, that gratitude is one of the things that makes the most difference in those times as well. And so, I was talking to parents about having a whiteboard and writing down all the things we're grateful for over and over, or making lists, or going around the dinner table, because that's shifting our focus to something different. And in some ways, it's some semblance of control, because they're going to need a little bit of control when things feel really out of control.
One thing I will say around the Covenant shooting that was just right down the street from our house, and our friends, some of them are at that school, and a lot of our friends are very close to those at that school. And some of the classes that my girls are in, extracurricular activities, there's some kids that go. So kids hear so much outside, and so much of what we tried to do was be that source of information. And our school was really good about, as teachers, I'm going to try not to get emotional, but as teachers were bringing our kids to the car, they all, you can just feel just the grief in our community, because I'm so grateful for our community and how well we love each other. Yes. Because it's just like, you could feel in every adult, just the weight of what everyone was feeling and carrying for the people we love. And my older two, and even Lennon, my 3-year-old, all throughout that day, they would say, "Mommy, are you having a hard day?" And my teacher was having a hard day too. But their teachers weren't saying things. They weren't, because they wanted that conversation to be had at home, so that the source was coming from parents.
So good.
But my older two specifically are very aware that something was going on, to the point that I think Ada James, I think she said, "Mommy, are you having another baby?"
Oh my gosh.
Wow. Because I had just been so emotional. Amazing. And you just kind of felt like all day long, just the heaviness. Yes. And I guess when I'm pregnant, I am so sick and just cannot pick myself up off the ground. And so they were feeling that in me. And so when we did have the conversation and I was able to be that source, that was one thing that I really didn't want to say a whole lot, because I was like, they are kids. Like, they don't need to know every detail. Right. So as I spoke to them the night before, and then before they went just back to school, we had another conversation that morning, because I thought they're going to go to school and there are going to be some kids who were directly impacted in whatever way that may be with that school, and they are going to hear things. And so we told a little bit more before they went back to school that day, but they still heard things that did not come from my mouth.
Of course. And
it was not, no ill intent, but they came home with more questions. And they know, they're, for weeks after, they're like, "Mommy, are you having a hard day?" And in that, I feel like, I know it's very important to not feel, or how did you say it? If your emotions are bigger than theirs. And mine, I think for parents, for sure, our emotions were bigger certainly. In a lot of ways. Because of the detail that we know, because of the people that we know, or what it may be. And so sitting in that with them and finding that balance with them, because they live with us. So they are going to feel those bigger emotions on their parents, whether we want to keep it from them or not. But letting them feel that with me and me being honest about it, that was really hard to navigate, and to talk about their teachers, who they love and who, are teachers, really had this sense of protection, especially that day. But even now, it is it is a different feeling and spirit on campus, even now. Yes. And that it will probably be that way for a while, and maybe some of that won't ever go away. Yeah. But processing all of that with kids that has been very hard to navigate in the conversations that you can't control, and how to kind of bring that back and bring it to the place of, you need to ask mommy and daddy these questions. And that's been really hard to navigate, I think.
Yeah.
Yes. And that will happen a million times over the years. They're going to hear a lot of things from a lot of other kids. And so as you're setting yourself up to be the source and to say, I want you to come ask me anything, anytime, and that we don't act shocked or appalled or get angry with questions, that we just sit with them in it and give them safe, truthful answers.
Yeah.
You're going to continue.
And I think where I was going with part of that is when they feel that the people in their life who are leading them, whether it is their teachers or us, when they are aware enough to realize there are bigger emotions happening and they ask those questions, like, what are the proper responses? Like, yes, mommy is feeling this because X, Y, and Z. Do you just say it matter of fact? Like, or like with Willa Gray, when I was having the conversation about adoption and how she came to be in our family, I just cried because there's a part of me that I can't hold it together when we're talking about things that are really hard.
Right.
And not in a panic way, but just like real emotion. Yes, mommy is really sad, and this is why.
Yes. And I think with little one, I mean, every age child, that's so good for them to see feelings to live in us, because it's
in moms and dads.
In moms and dads, because they're going to need to learn to talk about feelings. And we could talk about all the things going on with teenagers who haven't learned to talk about feelings. And I would add with little ones, because kids so often will dam up their own feelings if they feel like my mom is really sad. And so to let them see that, and then to say, mommy's really sad about this too, and I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
And you are too.
It's really good.
Yeah.
You know, that we go back to a place of centered where they don't feel like they have to take care of us.
Right.
Because that's too much.
Right.
But it's both things.
Yeah. Finding the balance of letting them see you be human,
Yes.
but also not trying to put that on them.
Right.
I experienced, I think maybe for the first time, we had a caseworker in our house because of little brother just last week. And she was giving me an update while Addie is eating dinner. And she suddenly couldn't eat dinner and only wanted to be held like a baby. So it's like she could sense.
She intuitively knew,
that there's something heavy going on. And so I let her stay with me for about a minute. And then I texted my neighbor and said, can you come play with her? And she had a great time with my neighbor, and she was like, she ate her whole dinner. We're out swinging.
Wow.
We're doing great. But I think that was the first time I'd seen that in her. And I'm like, I don't know what else to do other than get her out of here so that she's not hearing this right now. Because I'm also like reacting, and I'm like, wait, let me not react so strongly to some of the information that's coming to me, because she is feeling it and now can't eat. And so I don't know if I handled that appropriately, but we'll
there you
have
go.
so
Intuition.
much more of that for the next year and a half, even probably.
Yeah.
Yes. Wow.
Yeah.
Sissy, finish us with this. I feel like an overarching thing you're saying to parents is you can trust yourself.
Yes. Yes. You can definitely trust yourself, and that God's going to give you the information you need for your kids.
That's very freeing
Yeah.
and comforting because it's scary to even anticipate some of the things that might come our way with these littles, which I'm sure every parent has felt forever. But I think because our families look different and the circumstances are different, it feels really scary. But probably every parent has felt that forever.
But I would definitely say in 30 years of counseling, no matter what your family setup is, one of the most indicative of God's goodness and kindness and love for us, things for me to see over the years has been the intuition of parents and moms maybe in particular.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like, I should say, the hard conversations that I have had so far, whether it be with friends at Covenant or adoption or mommy's leaving, I'll be back, even as small or big as that question may seem, I do think it is, at least when I'm in that situation, it's easy to be tempted to be fearful of diving into that question. But someone told me one time, I think as a mom, you want to protect your children so much, like the innocence I was talking about earlier. Like you want to protect that innocence, and you want them to stay little and innocent, and the world be as beautiful as it once was to them.
Yeah.
But the reality is that we live in a broken world,
Right.
and they are going to grow up.
Yeah.
And there are going to be hard conversations. And it is much better for us to get down on their level, get in it with them, and prepare them for what they're going to go through instead of try to just protect them. Because at the end of the day, you really can't protect them from everything, but you can lead them to the one who protects all.
That's right.
And I feel like at the end of the day, if you can get in those hard conversations and say, it makes you sad, it makes me sad too. And but we can bring that to God. We can bring those hard questions to God, and we might not get an answer. And that's okay too. And we'll be together in that as well. And it does feel scary. But I was saying to you not too long ago, sometimes when I feel the most afraid to speak something, usually it's because it needs to be said.
Yeah.
That's so good.
And I've found that with my kids. And I think if you can have that open, honest dialogue and that safe place, and you have to be courageous enough to jump into those hard questions with your kids, and it will be hard for them and for you. But growing up is hard, and living in this world is hard.
Yes.
Yeah.
And thankfully, there's hope outside of the hard.
Right. That's right.
Praise
That's
God.
right.
And you want to raise strong, brave kids.
Yes. That's right.
Man, what a helpful and sweet episode. I just loved it. Thanks for listening today. Take a minute and go check out more from the Live in Love podcast with Lauren Akins. Just search for that name in your podcast app, the Live in Love podcast, and hit follow to hear more.
And while you're at it, go ahead and hit follow on the after party. And if you've liked this show, would you please rate it for us? We would love to hear what you think. And we'll see you back here tomorrow.